Welcome to Healing Lives with Corey Gilbert, a podcast sponsored by the Healing Lives Center. Discover how to love and lead your family well and biblically. God created sex, marriage, and the family for our stewardship, growth, and benefit. My heart and passion is to teach, train, educate, and disciple Christians that want strong marriages and families. The Healing Lives Center has been serving Christians since the year 2000. Its mission is to be a center for sex, trauma, and marriage education and transformation, where we offer counseling, coaching, courses, and speaking services to you, your church, or ministry. Check us out at healinglives.com. I was honored to be interviewed by Efrosinya Vshivkoff. Effie reached out to me asking about some really tough questions when it came to anxiety and sexual abuse. So I wanted to play this as a part of this 300th episode of my podcast, because I think it's very relevant. Questions that parents need to ask, questions that most of us probably need to ask when it comes to raising kids, our family, our marriages. So I hope this is a challenge and encouragement, and I'm very proud of Effie for reaching out and for asking these hard questions. So join me today.
Hi, welcome to Anxiety, What is Happening to Me. I have a guest on my show today. We're going to be talking about anxiety and sexual trauma. My guest is Corey Gilbert, and he has a PhD in family psychology, and he also is a professional licensed counselor. So I thought that he would be a great person to have on my podcast to talk about this issue, because I have no professional experience in it, but Corey does. He's also been doing this for over 22 years, and he loves coaching people, and he has a completely different method. He doesn't sit there and talk to you for years. He tries to get you to move forward with your life. So, hello, Corey.
Hello, thank you for having me. Excited to talk about this, even though it's definitely a hard subject.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I have you on here, because I feel like it'll be nice to have that professional aspect to it. So do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
No, I'm just glad to talk. You have some great questions that I want us to get into, so I'm excited to offer that to those that are listening.
Okay, so one of the first questions that I have is, how does adolescent sexual trauma affect puberty and beyond? Like, if somebody had sexual trauma when they were a child, and maybe if they didn't talk about it to their parents or to anybody at all, and then all of a sudden they're in puberty and beyond, and they're having all of these feelings, like what did they do then? Did they ask for help? What is their option? They're older now. They know what happened to them. They understand it better. And so you have any advice for that?
Well, I guess the scary thing is they don't ask for help, that they don't find people to be safe to talk to. And even parents who say, I talk to my kids and I tell them that I'm available for you to talk. The fact is the kids, the teens even, will not bring it back up. The shame that we have when something like that, something so horrific or something so confusing happens, it shuts us down. And so puberty, as you mentioned, that's a big one. Puberty it hijacks the body and reveals a lot of the junk. That's, I think, a lot of our transgender and a lot of the transitioning and questioning kids, it's coming from trauma. And so they're freaked out at the idea of becoming a man or becoming a woman, adults, like that picture of that. So they run. Where they go to, I think, is critical. So if they run to online communities, they're in trouble. If they run to gender affirming therapists, which is the term nowadays, they're in trouble. So having these conversations, sad to say and weird to say, around the dinner table is critical. And then getting people in our kids' lives, my kids too, we talk about this stuff at the dinner table, but I make sure that they get around people that they could go talk to if they wouldn't talk to me. It's setting up a community of safe people that will engage with them.
Yeah, and how about if they are in puberty, and maybe they're starting to get some anxiety, what kind of tips would you have for them? If for some reason they don't have that community and that circle that you're talking about, or maybe their family is abusive, and so they never had a chance to talk about anything, you know. So,
Well, and that's the sad thing is if their family's abusive or if they don't have that community, the honest truth is they're in trouble.
hmm
As in they don't have a space, they don't have a place. So that's where we really need to be afraid.
hmm
My opinion, moms and dads often are naive in a sense. The world
hmm
is not the same world today when we grew up. But then
yeah,
what if the parent has a history of sexual abuse in their own life? There's
hmm
all these areas they're afraid to talk about or won't talk about because of their story. And then it becomes generational, it becomes
hmm
multi generations of abuse versus someone saying, I need help. So a place to get help is the fact is online. This is the scary part. There are great places to learn to,
hmm
but where you learn from, you become like your teacher in a sense. So if
hmm
you go learn from someone that tells you you're just perfect the way you are,
hmm
of course you're actually going to go in directions of just emotion or whatever I feel
hmm
versus going in the direction of God wants to mature you into a much different person than you are today. And that's discipleship, that's growing in who you are. We don't wait till they're adults to start doing that. We need to be
yeah,
doing that when they're 5, 6, 7. And then 8, 9, 10 is almost like an on ramp to puberty.
hmm
I believe 8, 9, 10 is where you're talking more about even here are the parameters about dating and about relationships. But most
yeah,
parents like they were like, oh, they're too young for that. No, when you are ready to talk to them at 13, they already formed their opinion and they're not going to listen to you. So it's having
hmm
these conversations earlier. When my kids were little, I asked them questions after a babysitter left. I would ask questions about whether they were touched in any way or change their diaper or panties or whatever
yeah,
else. I ask really hard questions, but not because I was looking for an honest answer, because shame shuts
hmm
us down. I was looking for change in their answer.
yeah,
So a lot of it's just as a parent being able to ask hard questions. But like as you said, what if they don't have safe parents, healthy parents?
hmm
What if they don't have that community? Um, that's where if I can come in as an aunt or an uncle, if I can come in as someone else,
hmm
it's critical to actually in the end build that community and build that space. Otherwise where a teen goes, a preteen goes is actually really scary, especially with online and devices, the way we go online, in a device in our hand that we can hide or go to the bathroom with.
yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, so like so going back to like the subject, like what if somebody's like listening to this right now and they have experienced some sexual trauma and they want to look for help, who would they call? Like what would be their first step if they're ready to get some
Yeah.
help?
So first of all, you want someone who's been trained to work with trauma. But here's kind
hmm
of my rule of thumb. If they start asking you all these detailed questions about your past trauma, run.
hmm
That's
hmm
not someone who knows what they're doing to work with trauma. If you're
hmm
having to retell your story over and over and over, you're being re-traumatized. And what I have found is much more effective is education. So
hmm
learning about how the past affects who I am today, and then learning skills that help me deal with myself today, because I can't delete what happened to me. I can't erase it.
hmm Yeah,
And
exactly.
for some people, they remember it vividly, but for other people, it's like some distant, faded, dark, scary thing that they actually don't remember, which actually is almost even scarier. Like
hmm
moments in your time where it's just blank. I don't remember this. And I would say sometimes when we don't remember, it's by the grace of God we don't. So don't pray to
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Um, but I still need help. So learning about how your brain files away memories, how the brain recalls memories, how your body remembers. So then there's physical aspects of how we live that when someone touches me, or even just a look from someone, here's why it affects me. And when I understand biology, when I understand the body, then I start realizing, oh, that's a trigger and that affects me here and that. But now I don't have to just react. I can actually steward those things. The more I
Okay.
learn about who I am, I actually can start going, oh, that's a safe person that I don't, yes, definitely touch me. Like, this
Yeah.
is a good, but I'm able to run it through my conscious brain versus it all running in my unconscious, which is when we have past trauma. It's running through a filter of a system in my unconscious that I can't control. It seems like outside of my reach. So the
Mm-hmm.
goal is to move out of my unconscious to my conscious, which is where I take every thought captive, where I
Mm-hmm.
engage my prefrontal cortex, and then that third level, unconscious to conscious, is my speech. So speaking to um, someone, talking to someone. It isn't going and telling my story necessarily. It's
Mm-hmm.
talking through, how am I affected today? So the picture I like to paint about counseling should be, I want to have my feet firmly planted today, in today, and
Mm-hmm.
just looking over my shoulder at the past, but I'm not going to go back and relive my past. I don't want
Yeah.
to be haunted by it and re-traumatized by it. But as I learn how my body reacts today, and my head, my heart, all of it, I actually start realizing that I can cut those tentacles from the past, and I can start ridding myself of that wiring, that harm, and I can live much more embodied, if you will, in today. Um, and all of this, as a Christian, to me, is actually allowing the Holy Spirit to transform my head, my heart, my mind, my body, by awareness and by learning and by growing. I don't like psychology. To me, if you look at psychology, it's very secular. It's very um, anti-God even. And
Yeah.
so do we just throw the baby out with the bathwater? And it's like, no, we actually see that there are really good tools that can help me um, be the best version of myself today for one purpose. And to me, the one purpose is, God, where do you want me to serve?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And
So
so,
basically learning to stay in the present and
mhm,
not living with what's going on in the back of your head and experiencing through this filter, right?
mhm.
Like this
And it is
this
a
filter
filter,
that
a
we
good
have.
picture. That
Mm-hmm.
filter, which then makes me where I don't talk to my kids and I don't address these issues, or I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. All these other things control me. And the
Mm-hmm.
goal is to be able to go, no, actually, I want to be able to go do that. That over there, I don't want to do. So I'm going to say no to that, and that's okay. But there's some things where I want to lean into. So a young person who is afraid to get married because of their
Mm-hmm.
past versus a person who kind of pushes through the fear, if you will. But
Mm-hmm.
some push through the fear without dealing with the actual harm. And that's where you have further harm. And so a lot of it's dealing with the past, but living in the present and gaining skills and tools. So whoever you go find to help, counselor, someone that you would trust to talk through this. I would say sometimes it can even be a friend who you're really allowing in close to allow you to process through and talk through this. But even
Mm-hmm.
that is almost secondary to the education piece.
Yeah,
So
so
learning,
getting educated is the most important.
uh,
And just having that validation that it did happen to you, but now educate yourself. Learn how to process your emotions and learn why you're feeling the way you're feeling and moving forward, right? Yeah.
yeah. And if you don't have people in your life to talk to, then again, that's where most of us turn online. We turn to online sources, which is
Mm-hmm.
really scary in the end. If we just go there and we just listen to YouTube videos, we just listen to podcasts, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of unhealthy teaching out there about sexuality, about gender, about marriage. So
Mm-hmm.
who I listen to absolutely, absolutely matters. Are they coming from a biblical worldview that has Christ at the center of why I'm even here?
Yeah.
Otherwise, well, again, what's the point of me even being here, especially after trauma? It
Mm-hmm.
bends me much more towards suicidal or towards no value, lack of importance. So yeah,
Okay. So I had a question. So we kind of
yeah.
touched on triggers a little bit, like as you were talking. So when somebody's experiencing a trigger, they can you explain triggers a little bit more? Because most of us just kind of live our lives, and when things pop up, we usually just tend to blame it on somebody else. We will blame our feelings on the person next to us. We'll
Mhm.
blame our feelings on the people driving next to us. Like, we don't like to actually experience the feeling and realize that it's our feeling. It has nothing to do with the people around us. So can you kind of explain like triggers, like when we do feel a trigger, and and to realize that it's our trigger,
Mhm.
it's our feeling, and not based on the surroundings or other people. If you
Yes. So it's funny when you go back to Genesis, and you look at Adam and Eve in the garden, and Eve
Mhm.
took that fruit and ate that fruit, and then this is where blame comes into the picture. The
Mhm.
first thing that happens is, she blames the serpent, and Adam blames Eve, and everyone's blaming someone else. It's always someone else's fault, and that's where the seeds of this are. We are by nature not going to take on truth, if you will. And
Yeah, the
so
our
fast
own
today,
our own,
yeah,
yeah.
it's scary.
It's
So
hard. It's hard to
it
like
is.
put that on yourself. You
But
want
when
it to be
we
somebody else's fault.
Yes, and when we see that that's how I'm wired because of sin, because of the fall, I can have some grace for myself first and go, okay,
Mhm.
my default was to blame them. And actually, there might be tons of evidence to blame them, but that doesn't help me. It actually traps
Yeah.
me. It's actually a trap, it's a snare of the devil. So, how do I get free? I actually learned that when there's a trigger, I steward my response. No one
Mhm.
else can say, control, or in that moment influence my response. And so
Mhm.
here's a little method that I've learned. It's called trigger behavior reward. Trigger
Mhm.
behavior reward. That when there's a trigger, there's always a response, a behavior, but there's always a
Mhm.
reward or a reason why I do what I do. There's a
Mhm.
payoff. So a lot
Mhm.
of the things that we're doing now as an adult or even a young adult or teenager is patterns I learned that when I was triggered here, I responded in this way because that's to me the gold. We want to go the other way. We want to look at triggers, try to figure out the triggers. And I go, let's go the back door
Mhm.
and let's go into why am I responding in that way? Oh, when I had that trigger before, I had this response because I was in danger or because there was a threat. But am I today? No, I'm not. Oh, and so the goal is to get that reward that used to work or that may have worked, even if it was false,
Mhm.
to make it distasteful, to make it not something that actually is true. And as
Mhm.
I dismantle it, my system falls apart and I have to then rebuild a new system, which is where
Mhm.
I can middle when I can insert a new behavior. So when some song triggers me and all of a sudden I feel like I'm having an anxiety attack, or
Mhm.
I take that smell just takes me back to some place. I'm able to go pause, wait a minute. I don't want that response. That's not getting me where I want to go. I don't want
Yeah.
anything else hijacking my head, my heart, my body to where now my heart's racing and I'm having an attack, panic attack, or I'm shutting down.
Mhm.
I want this because that's the reward. Because I want to honor Christ, because I want to be this person, because I want to be this kind of person, because I
Mhm.
want to maintain my presence in the moment, whatever that might be, I start learning to hack the system, if you will.
Yeah.
And then all from a secular. So think about what I just said. That's all a secular model. Now insert prayer, insert solitude, insert the Sabbath, insert reading your Bible, insert
Mhm.
scripture. All those spiritual disciplines are the like what we should be using to actually go, God, I need help orienting me back towards you.
Yeah.
My bent is to run. My bent is to freeze. My bent is to fight. It's not to rest in you and rest in the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Like, that's so great. It's- like, just, yeah, definitely getting yourself to. What if somebody like is hurts people in their response? Like they're automatic reaction is to go into the fight, not the freeze or the flight. They go straight into the fight. How did they apologize for that? Like, how did they explain to the people around them that they weren't really able to control their response at that time, because maybe they haven't started using God and prayer and all of those things that you just talked about, and they're just learning about themselves right now.
Well, I guess they can apologize all they want, but we're not going to believe them if there's not change. So the truth is if people are doing that and even apologizing, I'm learning to distrust you more and more, because you can keep apologizing for the same thing and you keep hurting me in the same way. There needs to be a boundary there. That's a scary one when it comes to marriage. When I'm married to someone who's actually hurting me over and over and over the same way, we almost kind of think, well, I'm just supposed to take it. It's like, no, there needs to be a boundary there and consequence and sometimes even a wall. Like, this is not acceptable behavior. That seems unloving. And that's where I think we've embraced a very secular understanding of what love is. The loving thing to do is not take it. The loving thing to do is to raise the bar and expect more of someone and go, no, this is unacceptable behavior. I understand that there's history of trauma or hurt, or that does not excuse your behavior. So you need to get help. We need to get help. To me, this is where it does lead to a lot of divorce. It leads to a lot of pain. Doesn't have to. It does not have to, but often does. And then we don't know why. And then we go repeat the problem again with someone else because you still haven't dealt with why.
Yeah.
So the goal is to grow, to learn. And I come back to that education piece. When I learn about why I respond in a certain way, like, why do I keep taking abuse from someone? There's a reason why I'm not fighting back. And a lot of it's the way I was trained, the way I was raised, the way I grew up, my theology in my mind as to who I should be. Doesn't mean it's right. It's the way I'm made. It's the way I seem to be, but it doesn't mean I'm right. That's a scary, path to go down, because I can't play the card, well, because I was abused, or because I have trauma, or because I'm being a jerk, or I'm being abusive. I can say that once, and then I get help, and I change, I grow.
Okay.
And so relationships should be one that's evolving and growing together. As a husband and wife, you should be growing together and closer and closer and closer. Even though you kind of ebb and flow in life, you're back and forth, closer in seasons and not so much in others. In the end, we should be getting closer and closer as we raise kids, as we do life, as we look towards latter years post children, where now it's just us. I need to like you now. I need to want to be around you.
Exactly.
Writing that day that it's just us. And a lot of older couples just kind of survive together, and it's heartbreaking because it's like you're missing out on a joy of the creation of God, of the family. And it wasn't just husband, wife, make kids. It was the whole picture of iron sharpens iron and growing and maturing, because you married that person, and with all their good, bad, and ugly, God's using that to grow you. And so we need to lean into that challenge, but also the blessings of it. The blessings come from a lot of hard work, not rolling over and being silent, or just taking it. So it's hard work.
Yes, marriage is definitely hard work. So you're saying, like, kind of to summarize what you kind of said, so if your spouse does have a good boundary and you are the person that has trauma and you're apologizing for it, and you feel like they're not loving you because they do have a boundary and they're saying, no, this is not okay, that they're doing the right thing, right? In that moment, they're having a boundary, they're saying this is not okay, and you shouldn't play that card. That's kind of like what you said, right? Don't play that card and go get help. Yeah, go get help.
Yes.
Yep, and change.
The truth. None of us can do this alone. None of us are meant to do this alone. But then if we're not careful, we get into communities, as in we create a group of people around us that affirm whatever it is we think or believe,
Mm-hmm.
and not truly helps us. Or we go, oh, it's all about diversity. Let's go over here to where it's all about lots of different people. And they're
Mm-hmm.
doing the exact same thing in that context, if there's not truth. As
Mm-hmm.
in, if you're sinning, there needs to be exposure of that sin and dealt with it. Like it needs to be rooted out.
Yeah.
So how I treat my spouse, how I treat my kids, how I live my life, all these things need to actually be, am I growing more towards being a Christ follower, being who God wants me to be? So yeah, that's I'd say many, if not most people I know, too many people I
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, Life is just about punching a clock and kind of doing life and showing up the next day and punch the clock and do life. And it's like, really, that's God's design? What are you doing today to glorify God in who you are, even if you didn't see another person today?
Yeah,
But if
exactly.
you do, how are you doing it to bless and lead your children or your spouse or those you work with? I don't care where you work. Same. You don't need to necessarily change your job. You may need to change your attitude towards your job. How am I showing up
Yeah.
and being the best person in that space versus rah, 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 hating my job, hating my life? Because I look at a lot of teenagers that look at their moms and dads and go, I wouldn't want what they have. They're miserable.
Yeah. Yeah.
They reject all of it. I don't want marriage. I don't want to be that kind of man. I don't want to be that kind of woman. I don't want to have that kind of job. I mean, the young people today that won't go work, what have they done? They've watched their parents react to the world in a way that we train them to be very, very, very lazy or scared.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Because they do look at us and they do want a better life. And if all they see is grumbling
yeah,
and no giving, no charity, no God loving
yeah.
types of activities, that's definitely why they're not wanting to work and they just want to stick around. So,
No, my kids right now,
yeah.
my oldest is 16 and he's got a job. I think he had like 40 hours of work last week at Chick-fil-A, which has been fun. Um,
Yeah.
because he really actually prefers the farm work. He actually likes out in the middle of nowhere, more alone. So Chick-fil-A with all the energy and people is not necessarily his favorite, but he's doing it. My middle
Yeah.
son, who's 14, already works at Corbin in the lunchroom washing dishes. And
That's
he
great.
kind of likes it and hates it because he's learning that he doesn't like being isolated in that room washing dishes. He's too social.
Yeah.
But then my 12-year-old daughter is going, it's not, life's not fair. I want a job. I'm like,
Yeah.
because each
Well,
family raises their kids different. And
yeah.
I believe that work is not a curse. Work is a gift. And so
Yeah.
I want to train my kids that work is not something you do because you have to. And oh, it's such a drudgery. It's a beautiful thing. That's a different
Absolutely.
philosophy than others. And so every family's doing that with everything, commitment to sports, musical instrument, whatever it is that we sign up with. But
Yeah. Well, great. So I have a question that's going to circle back to
yeah,
to
go ahead.
sexual trauma. So, I kind of wanted to touch on the subject of feeling suppression and how can that cause somebody to sexually abuse somebody because their feelings were suppressed, or maybe they didn't talk about it, or maybe they didn't even know why they're having those feelings. They never got educated on sex or feelings or any of
Mhm.
that stuff, and they just kind of grew up being clueless. And so then they go sexually abuse somebody because they just give in to their urges without any type of structure in their life.
Well, and again, this comes back to education.
Hmm.
A lot of families that I've worked with over the years, they believe that uh, talking about certain subjects is going to bring up the idea. It's kind of like with suicide. I don't want to bring
Hmm.
up suicide because it might give them an idea. It's like you're not giving someone an idea. They already had it, or they're going to not even hear you almost. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to kind of go, hey, are you really okay? Are you suicidal? Could you actually kill yourself and do that? Like, be honest about it. We're afraid to. No, that the tactic there is go straight in. We need to do the
Yeah.
same with sexuality. And to me, the curve is we need to go younger.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be
So how
addressing
how
this young
young would you how young would you recommend to start having these kind of conversations with your children?
one,
One.
2, 3, 4. Like we start at age appropriate, but
Mm-hmm.
earlier than you think. Why we're preparing them versus protecting them. We want to protect them
Gotcha.
still, even as a teenager. We protect them from themselves a lot of times, but
Yeah.
we want to prepare them about what is pornography. The average age that, especially a boy and even girls now are seeing pornography is 7, 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So are we going to talk about pornography when they're a teen? They're going to teach you a
Yeah.
lot, by the way. Your teenager is going to teach you a lot about what you don't know because you may have
Yeah.
looked at magazines when you were a kid. They're on their phone scrolling video after video, or on your iPad that they've stolen from you that you didn't know that was floating around,
Yeah.
or through some other device that you didn't know had internet access. They're not
Yeah, like
looking
a
at
flip
naked
phone.
pictures.
Who
Yes,
knew that a
and
flip phone had internet access? I
yeah,
got
and they're
one
not
for my
looking at
kids.
just pictures. Yeah, and
Yeah.
those flip phones are unfiltered.
Yeah.
Where almost a smartphone, you can actually lock it down somewhat. And so a lot of where we're at as a parent is they're teaching us about some of the technology stuff. So at 1 and 2 and 3, you're planting seeds about your body and how boys are made and girls are made and some of the
Mm-hmm.
basics. But as they're
Okay.
about 6 or 7, you're already teaching about sex and the way it's made, why their bodies are capable of actually doing this.
Okay.
So they need to steward the fact that, boys, your penis actually has another purpose than you just playing with it because you like it. Like
Yeah.
it can do damage. Oh, and so can your head and what your eyes see and your desires. And if I prepare them younger, what actually happens when they enter adolescence is it's not quite an onslaught. It's not
Uh-huh.
filled with shame. It's actually something they can walk in and go, oh, I have to steward this.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I'm a sick, horrible individual who deserves to be locked up, which is what a
Yeah.
lot of people feel.
Yeah.
So,
They'd be like, okay, I'm feeling these feelings right now, but that's okay. And then,
mhm,
but be present with the people around you and
yeah.
educating that
But,
it's okay to feel. So,
right, but they're not going to necessarily come talk to you. So, again, what
hmm
I hear from parents, oh, but I've told my kids they can come talk to me. And I'm like, great. Some of them will. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 or 20 would come. Most are going to actually think they're supposed to just handle this by themselves or really see you as unsafe because of what you might do with the information. You might criticize
yeah.
them, ridicule them, whatever. So they either go elsewhere or for most, they don't go anywhere. They
Yeah.
manage. So the responsibility lies on mom and dad to actually often address questions that aren't being asked yet. And so,
Yeah.
like asking about, hey, how's your stewardship of looking up pornography? Um,
Yeah.
when when we were out the other day, I know you noticed that young woman was dressed this way. What did your head say? What did your heart say? What were you thinking? When they're younger, they'll actually tell you, which is actually really
Yeah.
fun. When they
Yeah.
become an
I should ask
adolescent, they
my 4-year-old boy because we'll be like, I'll be watching and there's always the woman dressed very skanky in every video.
yeah,
And
yep.
so, and you'll kind of see him like, just looking, it'd be an interesting conversation. I haven't had one with him, but yeah,
And
you're right.
what you're doing is you're helping him steward the fact that you saw her, but you steward what you do.
Yeah.
So you saw, you don't just go do or go think
Yeah.
or go hide it over here and you know use it for later fantasy. You actually go, wow, that person has a story and that person actually is a human and that person's a person and I want boundaries. You're teaching that
Yeah.
at 4, 5, and 6 and 7, and you're preparing them for, okay, puberty is going to hit, and man, is this going to be like a onslaught. So how do you steward that? You do it ahead of time. Now,
Yeah.
what if you haven't, and now you have a teenager that you need to have these conversations? That's a lot more difficult
Yeah.
because you're entering in and they don't want to listen and they don't want to hear from you. They were actually kind of done with you. And I'd say,
Yeah.
mom and dad, push hard, push hard, push hard. Every time you sit down for dinner, have hard conversations. Whatever you can have them in the car, have those hard conversations. Anytime I'm alone with my boys, I'm asking hard questions, talking about some of those hard issues. It's harder
Yeah.
when like my 16-year-old starts driving. Now I don't have those kind of stuck in a car times, so I have to be more
Yeah.
intentional in finding those. But we're building on what we've talked about for 10 plus years,
Yeah.
not starting new. So the question you asked in the beginning of what about that young person who's, suppressing emotion?
Mm-hmm.
Every single person has emotion.
Mm-hmm.
For men, they tend to have one emotion called anger, but they actually label about 400 other emotions just that one word anger. And it's like, no, you actually have all sorts of nuances of emotions. You're just too lazy to name them what they are.
They're
So,
just all anger.
yeah, let's teach you about yourself. You're a lot more complicated than you realize. That wasn't really anger. That actually was jealousy over there. You just expressed it in anger. That really wasn't
Yeah.
anger. You expressed it in defensiveness. And if you start
Yeah.
looking, men are much more complicated than they even allow themselves to think. And
Mm-hmm.
so we teach that to our young boys to help them steward their emotions, because you don't just go take something you want because you want it, as in a boy that goes in and abuses a other boy or a girl.
Yeah.
Um, so I've seen that a lot with some families where we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about anything, and all of a sudden their boy is, you know, playing with their daughter.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, he's curious, and you've given him no answers about the world he lives in and the body he lives in. So, mom and dad, that's on you. Educate, educate, educate. That's why I wrote the two books I wrote. Is
Yeah.
one's for the parents to help teach them about a biblical view of gender and sexuality, to help them think through what they would teach, but then one's to hand to your teen or preteen that's for them to go, I have the same questions. What does the Bible say? And how can I think through marriage, polyamory, dating, boys, girls, masturbation, pornography, you name it? These
Yeah.
kids need answers. And so that's the two that I've written. That's really my heart and focus, to help prevent, but also help kind of clean up the mess as well.
Yeah. Because I mean, we'll talk about dessert. We'll be like, okay, there's chocolate cake in the fridge. Nobody eat it. But you have the same desire to go eat the cake, but because there's a consequence, right? And you know the consequences, and you know what's gonna happen if you eat it. So you don't sneak in the middle of the night to go eat the chocolate cake. You wait till dinner whenever you're supposed to eat it. And same thing with like, sexuality. Like it should be spoke about, like
Mhm.
you said. So this is a feeling, a desire, a good feeling, but it's the same thing, it's a no-no. You're not allowed to touch other people until you get married, and it's consensual, and all of those things. So
Well, that's where, to me, the next piece of that is, what is your theology of marriage?
mhm.
If I don't understand why marriage and why that's actually a sacrament, it's sacred and it's beautiful and it's protected, why would I care about that? That's a long time from now or may never happen. So I just want my cake and eat it too now. I want to kind of use your illustration. There's no reason to wait.
Yeah.
So I have to have a theology of marriage, which to me, that's, again, I need to plant that seed when they're in their single digits, and then grow that in their adolescence, to have a biblical view of marriage, that God created marriage to be one man and one woman for life, and
Mhm.
that's where the sexual expression is reserved for and limited to, and that
Yeah.
marriage and family and children and all these things are blessings, and it's a part of a structure that actually helps raise kids and launch. And this is not some social construct that people say it is, or some archaic thing that doesn't work anymore, so let's reinvent it, with multiple relationships or multiple marriages or multiple anything. There is one design that works, the rest fall short. So we have to
Yeah,
teach.
exactly. Yeah, definitely have to teach them that that's, these are the different ways that we live, It's, so let's see. I think I have one last question for you, just to kind of tie everything in. So, like, what is a trauma trigger and how is anxiety tied to it? So, like, let's say we were sexually abused, we had a
Mhm.
trauma trigger, and so like my podcast is like about anxiety and like getting to know yourself, and because when I dealt with the anxiety, like I had no idea that it was anxiety. I just
Yeah.
thought that it was the other person's fault. But then when I started educating myself and realizing, no, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling anxiety. So let's say somebody's listening to this and it's their first time maybe even realizing that they're feeling anxiety because of sexual trauma. Like what would, how is that all tied together?
Well, and so what I said earlier about the trigger behavior reward, where that came from is actually a researcher, Brewer, I think is the last name. He wrote a book called Unwinding Anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Very secular, the book. The book is not a Christian book. The book has all sorts of stuff that's like about how we evolved and all this stuff that I throw that out. It's not, to me, a biblical view. The tools have been used and used and studied and are actually really powerful tools of trigger
Mm-hmm.
behavior reward, the way our minds work. Carolyn Leaf, in her research, she's a Christian neuroscientist, has incredible tools that help us think through these exact same things. The truth is, because of harm, it's like something
Mm-hmm.
was taking away from me way more than just the sexual hurt or the physical hurt or the personhood hurt.
Yeah.
Um, it's my sense of self has been taken away. My sense of being able to protect myself, or so anxiety is very common and very prolific for someone who's has a history of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
My problem, what I see is even the men and women, men especially, but men and women who don't even realize they have a past of sexual abuse.
Uh-huh.
So they haven't even connected to what happened to them as a child was downright wrong. And so
Yeah.
that's why today they're trapped and they don't understand their story. And so they're living out a very disjointed life where triggers are just everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
when triggers are everywhere, it's like everything else is in control of me.
Yeah.
When I start undoing that web of a mess by going that other way around, so through the reward part, so not trigger, but reward, undo the reward, I can now have a new behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes that behavior is actually anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
here's the trigger. Behavior is I'm now anxious. I'm now in a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
Question, why? Why am I doing this way? Is this truly a threat? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, well, why am I made this way right now? Why do I seem to
Mm-hmm.
be out of control? And
Yeah.
most often I come to an answer at that point where I realize the moment it started, or I realized how it worked for me when I was this age or that age. And I start undoing the web and I start getting skills and tools to know myself, to calm myself down. The word mindfulness, I can't stand that word when it first came out because I felt way too like new agey and way too Eastern religion kind of stuff. And the truth is it's biblical on so many levels of you need to fill your mind with.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're filling it with what? Anxiousness, more anxiousness? No, it's God, who do you want me to be? Who have you called me to be? Who am I because of you and your sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
Most of us, again, we live our life punching a clock, doing life, being the mom or being the dad or being the this fill in whatever title. And it's like, no, it's you dig into mother, being mom, the best mom I can be, the best dad, the best at my job, the best. And that's part of who I am. And most of us wear many hats. So
Yeah, we do.
it's doing that as a mom, as a wife, as a all these different roles that we have. And then what's driving that? When I start realizing that purpose is actually critical,
Hmm.
the anxieties don't have time to catch. So you notice
Yeah,
the trigger and you notice the almost reaction, and you're like, see ya. There's
yeah,
not time for it. It's almost during idleness, or it's when I'm distracted, or when I'm really turned inside. What
yeah,
I tell couples that are struggling in marriage, I'm like, I want you done with your struggle that's inward as soon as
yeah,
possible. Because
yeah,
as long as you're focused inward, Satan can have a heyday with you, and you're
yeah,
actually not serving your friends that need you and others around you. And so
yeah,
when you're inward focused, you're not the best, in a sense, version of yourself where you're able to serve someone around you. So get outside of yourself, get over yourself is kind of what it really
yeah,
is in the end. But you can't say that in the beginning, and actually go serve someone. How do you handle depression? Oftentimes it's get out of bed, even though that's where you want to be, and go serve
yeah,
somewhere just for a few minutes, and you already see that your body starts rejuvenating, endorphins happen, dopamine hits, and you start finding joy. But the hardest part was getting out of bed. The hardest part was
yeah,
leaving the house. Anxiety
absolutely.
traps us. Anxiety is also another thing to remember. It's not the actual problem, like
Okay.
it's a symptom. And so what I see is our goal, the teenagers and young adults I see, their goal is to eliminate anxiety. And I'm like, now you're not human.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anxiety is everywhere. I mean, it like even when you need to feed your child, like you feel that anxiety, or you need to change their diaper, like it's there for a purpose. It gets you moving and understanding that anxiety is a good thing and not a bad thing. It's a bad
But
thing when you turn it into a bad thing.
when it's out of control, when it's actually
Yeah.
over and above, or it's an overreaction. So a
Hmm.
panic attack is the extreme version of that. When you have a panic attack, it's your body saying, "Hey, you got some work to do."
Yeah.
So why did you have that panic attack? What was the trigger? Why did I have a panic attack? What's the payoff? What was that trying to do in my life to manage the system, if you will? And you start realizing there are answers there. And when you start finding the answers, that's the key. It almost always changes who I am.
Yeah.
So when I start finding those answers, all of a sudden, that's all I needed. I didn't need to go to therapy. I didn't need to talk through all my problems. I didn't need to, spill out all my story to some stranger. That's not
Yeah.
always helpful. It's
Yeah.
education, and it's growing in my understanding of who I am, how God made me, how I'm wired, and then, okay, Lord, like now I see that trigger. What do I do next
Yeah.
time I have that trigger? Well, I respond different, but if there's no space between the trigger and the behavior, it's like, again, I'm being controlled by it. No, we don't want that. That's not helpful. It's not healthy. I want to be able to steward myself, my emotions. And then you see anxiety is actually a really good barometer of, wow, I'm anxious right now because I didn't prepare well. I'm anxious right now because I
Yeah.
didn't um I wanted to kind of sit over here and do this, but I need to have some motivation, and this is
Yeah.
it's put in the right place with some parameters and boundaries.
Yeah. I like how you said, like, if you're feeling depression or anxiety or any of that, and like you're going inward, right? You're going into your thoughts, you're going into your trauma, your feelings, and you're going inward. And one thing, like even with my self-healing journey, like I've learned that washing dishes is one of those things where I go inward because it's, you're just doing something and it's just monotonous. So I'm washing
Yeah.
dishes and I notice that's when I kind of go inward and I start. And if my husband comes home when I'm washing dishes, like he's like, "You're not smiling, you're like, what's wrong?" And everything. And it's like So I've learned to like, when I'm washing dishes, he comes home like, open that up, open my
Yep.
eyes and look at him,
Yep.
look at his face, look at what he's feeling and get
Yep.
out of my own head so that I could
Yep.
be present in that moment.
That's a
It's
great
really
picture.
easy to just go
Yes.
in when you're when you're doing
Yep.
something monotonous, for
Yep.
sure.
And a lot
So
of
yeah,
what we have to do in life is monotonous. A lot
mhm.
of our daily routine and stuff. And so it's not fun. And I hear that from too many people. It's like, well, it's not fun. It's not about fun. We have to teach our
Yeah.
kids that too. Work, like going and doing stuff work wise, isn't always fun. That's the wrong
Yeah.
barometer, or because I
Yeah.
want to, I need to. So you have a dog and they just puked. Well, that's not fun to clean up. Well,
Yeah.
we do it. Why? I don't want it to
Yep.
sit there and stay there. I don't want the smell, just like we have that with every baby and every little person. We have to constantly kind of come behind them. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, what's the motivating factor? And that's where anxiety, it's scary that anxiety, I think now more than ever, has hijacked our world, our young people especially,
Mhm.
because of our lack of understanding that this is meant to tell you something. So if you're
Yeah.
anxious going to a certain place, there's a reason. So we need to learn why. It's more
Yeah.
education about body than it is, I need to run from it. I need to hide. So
Yeah.
the default is often, or medicate. Medication is a great tool to calm me down to then get help. But
Yeah.
it's not the answer for anxiety, like the answer. It's a tool towards the answer.
Yeah. I like that. It's a
Mhm.
tool towards the answer. That's great.
Mhm.
Well, that kind of wraps things up, I think, unless you have something else that you
Awesome.
wanted to add to that.
Honored to be here and honored to have this conversation very much.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. And so I kind of wanted to see if there's anything else that maybe you wanted to talk about. Like, well, you did say that you wrote a few books, right? You have two books that you wrote, but there's also a workbook for
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
say that.
Where's that? Right there. I can't say that. It's for parents, and the workbook is goes along with it to help you think through the scripture and what is it, what does the Bible say about that? Ask tons of questions, because the
Hmm.
goal is not to tell you what to think; it's to help you think through your view on marriage and gender and sexuality and all these different topics, like I said earlier. And then the other one here is the similar content written for a teen or preteen to hand to them, for them
Hmm.
to think through the same questions. And the workbook is actually in that one after each chapter for the preteen or teen. I have some families that are doing this other one called Going Beyond the Talk. They're doing it as
Hmm.
a family, the family devotional,
Yeah.
because it's a conversation going, and that's been really cool to hear from different families. And then I have a trauma to transform program where I walk people through a trauma class I've been teaching for 15 plus years. And I
Hmm.
find that in that, or learning about trauma, ends up being all I need. I don't need to go talk through all my story. Only a few
Yeah.
people have to continue a little bit beyond that. And then my
Yeah.
current focus has been the healing marriage, which actually includes all of those things, my kids,
Hmm.
trauma. But God, to me, created your marriage to be a place of healing where each person helps the other person grow closer into who they should be as a Christ follower. So, how to
That's
create a
beautiful.
healing marriage. Mhm.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because two people bring a lot of, stuff into a
Yeah.
marriage. And I
Yeah.
really like the way you said that, like that we're there for each other and there to heal and then grow and
Yes.
be a better person, both the spouses.
And I see marriage as kind of three people. There's him, there's her, and there's two separate people they need work on, but there's an us. That's like a third entity of growing that us. And so all
Yeah,
three of them. And you can find all these on my website, healinglives.com or drcorygilbert.com. So that's
right.
what I do. Uh,
Great. And you also have a podcast, right?
yes,
So,
podcast. Actually, this year, 2023, I just changed the name of it again because I am weird like that. but it's the Healing Lives with Corey Gilbert. And I think I have my 300th episode here coming out soon. So
that's great. Woo! Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you for being here again.
Thank you for tuning in to the Healing Lives with Corey Gilbert podcast. It has been an honor to serve. If you are struggling, have questions, or in need, Dr. Gilbert offers a free consultation for new clients. Check us out at healinglives.com to book a call. If this has been helpful to you, please share it, leave a review, and help us get the word out so that we can see lives changed, marriages transformed, and more people come into a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. The Healing Lives Center offers online courses, programs, books, intensives, and other services to help you live biblically and well. Discover more resources on YouTube and in Dr. Gilbert's Healing Marriage Facebook group, The Healing Marriage.